which is a first time for us. So we're going to actually switch over to the sponsor tag here. So we're working with Newsly, and Newsly is an interesting company. They're an audio app for iOS and Android. So you pick up web articles about what's trending topics on the web at any given moment, and it reads them to you in a natural human voice. So the first time in history on the net, the web becomes listenable. So you can browse articles from topics you choose and start playing. Stop scrolling, start listening. They have podcasts as well, so you can explore trending podcasts from over 40 countries. Our podcast, Family Electric Ghost, is on there now. So you download the Newsly app for free, and you can go to www.newsly.me or use the link in the description. If you use promo code GHOST2021, you receive a 1 month free premium subscription. So we got that done. So now we'll switch back to your link. So you see below is the link for Salme Dahlstrom, and this will be up through the whole episode. So hopefully everybody can go to that link and check out her work. We're actually going to get it back going. So let's talk about how you first got into music. Like, because one of the things we like to ask artists, like, why did you choose to get into music? What was like the reason you felt that you had something to say?
Right. Okay. Well, so a little bit of a two-part question, I guess, because I started playing classical piano at age 5. And the reason had nothing to do with the love of music. It all had to do with being extremely competitive and having an older sister. My sister Linda is 2 years older than me, and she was 7 at the time. And mom had set her up with piano lessons. And I was like, I want that too. Only because she had it. I had no idea what it entailed, but I wanted in. And so that's how it started. I convinced my mom that I was, could do it. And then I started playing the piano. And kind of, realized that I liked it. I kept going. And then at 10, 11, picked up an acoustic guitar, which was much more rock and roll, and started writing songs. And at that time, writing came naturally to me. It was like natural progress of playing, writing, but I didn't know if it was good or not. I just knew that I had, it was something I did that made me happy, made me, want to play it to other people, so on and so forth. And then I played in bands after that and all of that. And I guess to answer the question, I realized that I really enjoyed it. It was something, and not only enjoyed it, it was something that I had to do for peace of mind, happiness of soul, stuff like that.
Yeah, it seems like when I talk to a lot of artists, it's like the work is like so bubbling up inside them that they have to have an outlet, like whether they're a musician or an actor or, it just, painter, that there's some kind of thing like the Victorian poets called it like the muse, right? Or you
right, yeah,
this like energy, and somehow artists can channel it, and and that's why I felt like most musicians will say like, I don't necessarily do it because I'm trying to be like Madonna, or I'm trying to be Hendrix, or I'm trying to be Robert Plant. I'm doing it because there's something inside me that I want to bring out.
Yeah,
and I want to do.
Yeah, and when you're a teenager, really, it's like it's all fun and games, right? You're doing it for fun. At least I did. There was no thinking, oh, could this be a job? I mean, I didn't even know what a job was. I was in school, right? But part of it was the reaction you got from your friends, right? When you picked up the guitar, suddenly you were the center of attention of the party, right? And there were enough people. If there were enough people who liked what you did, you got the confirmation that, oh, maybe this is something I should keep doing. It feels good, and I'm able to do things other people are not. So later on, it becomes, at least for me, became a little bit more of the Madonna thing. Like, can I pull this off? Can I make it a job? Can I do this on a bigger scale? Right.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing in music is like, can you take your idea and how much of your idea can you retain as a singer-songwriter? right?
Yeah.
And still be you, but like grow. I think everybody
Yeah.
like get in a band, the first thing you find out is like what works and what doesn't work, right?
Yes. And
And you
who works and who doesn't work.
who's actually writing the lion's share of
Yes.
everything and who's showing up and
Yeah.
who's putting the effort in. And
Yeah.
yeah, and then realizing like, okay, like you don't have a producer, then you get a producer, and then you're like, wow.
Yeah.
It's like
Right.
like the difference between like, okay, I'm in a garage band, I'm playing in a bar, and now I'm actually in a studio, and there's a recording engineer telling me, no, you need to use the metronome. You need
Right.
to use the click track.
Please, please sing in key and
Yeah,
stuff
sing
like
the
that.
key.
Yeah.
What key are
No,
you
it's
in? Do you know?
yeah. I mean, the first times you're in the studio, just hearing yourself back is a huge experience. Sometimes not a pleasant one for everybody involved, right? But
Yeah.
you learned from it. And the reason I started producing myself was actually, I did like what everybody else did. I was always the one who wrote the songs, who had the concept, who was the lead singer, the force
Mhm.
in the bands I was in. But I didn't produce at the time, right? So we needed a producer. And the producers, as great as some of them were, they had their vision. As soon as you bring somebody else in, they're going to add to what you're doing, but bring their own flavor, right?
Yeah.
Or in some cases, just fit you
Take
into what their sound is.
Yeah.
And that didn't work for me. And I don't want to take away any credit from those guys who produced. They were great. But
Yeah,
I
yeah.
had
You have
a,
a
a
vision.
I had a vision in my head, and that's why I started producing, because I was like, nah, it needs to be this vision.
Yeah. Well, I
And it was
think
a lot,
yeah, I think if you think about the great producers, you got like Brian Eno and Todd Rundgren and all these great is they have a vision, right? And either
yeah,
you agree with that or you don't. There's famous stories about how the band didn't really like how Todd Rundgren was working with them.
yeah, right,
um, but because he has a vision of how he does things, and he's really good
yeah,
within that whole genre.
yeah,
It's like the band is the band,
yeah.
and they can kind of produce themselves.
Oh,
So
absolutely. I mean, it depends, right? I mean, I really admire Madonna. Look at how many different songwriters, producers,
when she works,
everything
yeah,
and she works, and she's able to make top-notch magic with all of them. I
yeah,
mean,
she's
I
really
envy that a lot, because I'm not able to do that. I have my vision. I had to learn to produce. I mean, it's different roads you take, but I admire somebody who's able to be such a chameleon and just fit in and still be her,
yeah, yeah. I
in
think
that environment, not just be like, oh, I'm working with this guy and I'm going to sound like that. No, it's Madonna working with that guy.
yeah,
And that is
and
very special.
I think that's really cool because you think about like Madonna, Lady Gaga, David Bowie. Like David Bowie was the like original chameleon. He could be
Yes.
like he
Oh,
could
yeah.
be a thin white duke. He could be Aladdin Sane. He could be, he's gonna
Yeah.
be, Spiders from Mars. Give Ziggy, and
Yeah. He's
he would work
amazing.
with different people, and he just become. I mean, he one day
Yeah.
he's singing with Luther Vandross, right?
Mm.
And then he's doing like
Yeah.
glam rock, or he's
Yeah.
doing he could kind of cameo into anything. He's working with like German producers with Brian Eno doing all this
Yeah.
really futuristic new wave before new wave.
Yeah. And it
Um,
was still Bowie, right?
yeah, yeah, he's able
That's
to
a talent.
retain the Bowie edge but
Yeah.
change. And I
Yeah.
think that is really core, when you start getting really into it. But I think, yeah, a lot of times singer-songwriters today within the indie alternative world, or self-production, I think it is like your vision. And I think that
Yeah.
if you're dedicated to trying to get it to be what it needs to be to get out there,
Yeah.
um, I always appreciated the sound of independent musicians. Like, I loved REM. I love college radio. I was like a DJ.
Okay.
I
Nice.
was, I'm a 54. So like I was
Yeah.
in the heart of like the new age era, new wave era. I was in college, like spinning REM and Huskadoo and the
Oh, nice.
Replacements and Camper Van
Yeah.
Beethoven, like everybody that was like, oh, that I like all this stuff that nobody's playing.
Right.
And I've
Yeah.
kind of still gravitated to that kind of vision. Like the people I interview are people
Yeah.
like yourself, like where I want to find people who are not totally in the mainstream and are doing really interesting work. And I think that
And
needs to shine the light on that.
And I appreciate that.
Because I think that's I mean, it's boring to hear the same top 10 producers doing the same thing to everything. And not that it's
Yeah.
not danceable or not,
Yeah.
the hip thing to listen to, but I probably listen to the bottom 500, bottom 200 of the chart because I think that's where cool stuff is going on.
I mean, I agree with you. I love the super pop top 10 stuff, but there's definitely more variety and new discoveries to be made in other areas, right,
Yeah.
of the music industry.
Yeah. That's why I think it's just important to try to shine the light. So you realized you had a talent, you got into production, you were writing your own songs in the band. So like who are your influences and reference points if we were going to point out like other musicians? And some people don't really like to get into this, but like how far do you
Right.
want to go with who your influences, reference points are?
So this is probably may come as a surprise to some people who, to my fans, but so my biggest references and influences are 80s hair metal and the big beat movement.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. But if you listen to my music, I think if I explain it, you hopefully you hear it. The melodic stuff, like
Mhm.
it's the melodies of the 80s
Yeah.
metal
I
stuff.
do.
That's also coming from Sweden, where everything's about melody. ABBA, Roxette,
Yeah. Yeah.
everything is melodies and hooks and stuff. The 80s rock was super melodic, great pop songs, right?
Yeah.
But what I also loved about them, dressed up in the biggest sounds that you could play in stadiums and reach the guy, up in the nosebleed section, right? They were
Yeah.
songs that were made to play for hundreds of thousands of people. And I love that bombastic glam part of it combined with the melody.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think what's great about the 80s was like it is kind of hook oriented, but
Yeah.
then it's taken the progressive rock that like Genesis and Yes and all those guys did
Yeah.
and narrowing it down into a more
Right.
digestible. So you're using the synthesizers that Genesis and Yes and Pink Floyd were
Yeah.
using, but you're
Right.
putting in more digestible melodies and loops that are kicking that people
Yeah.
find. It's the same thing like Prince did with Kraftwerk. He took Kraftwerk German sounds and then
Yeah.
made them work in 3 minute, 4 minute pop songs.
Right.
From a funk
Because he had the melody, right? And he had
yeah,
all the hooks and it was he made a real pop song out of it.
yeah,
And so I fell in love with the big beat movement because it's also very big, right?
yeah,
But
yeah,
not full songs. But what I loved about it, especially Fatboy Slim, Chemical Brothers, The Prodigy, is the way they, as producers, I guess, treated the music.
mm,
Cut it up, put it through whatever machine you have, see what comes out,
more
and
experimental. Yeah,
yeah, and genre hop. Just beg, borrow, steal from wherever, country music. I'll put it in there, see what happens, right? So when I was putting my sound together, and all that, I remember having this conversation with my manager, and he's like, "What are you doing? Like, what is the sound? Explain it to me." And I was like, "I want to get the energy of the big beat movement, and I want to be able to treat my music that way, but with real pop songs, like full on, like verse, pre-chorus, chorus,
yeah.
that kind of
Just
songs.
yeah,
I want to get that in there instead of
you want
just
the
the one
structure.
hook."
Yeah, that's the
Right.
problem with some music today is so built on the grid, right? If you're
Yeah.
on a DAW, it's so tied to the grid that they
Yeah.
forget about the mechanics or like the art of a songcraft, right? If
Yeah.
you think about like Motown, like songs from like the Temptations and the Four Tops, it's like there's a structure. You think about the
Yeah.
Beatles, there's a structure. You even get
Yeah.
the Pink Floyd, there's a structure, right? And
Yeah.
then you get to the age of the DAW, and people start to just stick to, not I think what they do is they lose the idea. Well, where's the break? Where's the change
Yeah.
in the tempo? If you go back and look at a Carpenter song, it would
Yeah.
change tempo. It would
Oh yeah.
change. Yeah, I mean, it
Yeah.
was using progressive elements. Like
Yeah.
Yes will go and do something in one time signature and then switch and change to a different key. Really
Right.
good pop music, like the Beatles type pop music or Todd Rundgren, it does that.
Yeah.
It changes and that gives it character. So there's these like moments in the song where it's like really important that it shifts. But
Yeah.
if you just keep a driving beat, with no shifts, then it
Yeah.
becomes a little monotonous. And I understand it's kicking, but
Yeah.
it doesn't really give you the diversity of what you could do.
Yeah. And so you're absolutely right. I wanted to marry the two. I wanted the best of both of those worlds. I wanted to have that kicking, driving thing, but at the same time have all the the pop stuff of 60s, 70s, 80s, like a real pop song with the melodies and with the the bridge coming in and
Yeah.
all of that, right?
Yeah, having
And
a bridge is real important. You don't really hear bridges as much.
I love bridges.
I'm really into,
It's
like, I just love it when you get, like, a band that does that. I mean, I was listening to a band, called Tennis that kind of emulates the Carpenters, and they had this pop song, and it had a time signature shift. It had the drum beat
oh,
totally shifts to a totally different drum beat in the middle of
nice.
the song, and then goes slower, goes faster, speeds up. And I'm a big funk guy, and I'm a big progressive rock guy. So if I would
Okay.
listen to, like, 10-minute songs from, like, Peter Gabriel Genesis, and
Oh wow. Okay.
it does that. Yes
Yeah.
songs do that.
Yes.
They go like 10 minutes. That's why they kind of like little mini operas. But and I like the Who, like Tommy. So that's like
Nice.
that. So you hear, I'm gonna go there. That's where I like to go.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's hard today when people only want to hear 2 minutes. Then you
Yes.
can't. But there are ways to even in 2 minutes do that. There are
Yes.
some people that can do that. So it's like even if you do 2 minutes, you could be more innovative. You don't have to have the thing just going at 808 doing the same kick all through the whole thing.
Right.
You could do something else. But I
Well, you
think
gave me something. You gave me something to think about there. I have not played around with tempo a lot, but now I'm going to think about it.
yeah, I just think it's fantastic when you go back and you listen to some of the classic 60s, 70s stuff. Is you do the time signature changes are kind of big parts of the songs.
Yeah.
And I really, really dig it. And I always kind of point it out as a producer to other people when I'm working with them. It's like,
Nice.
if you did that, it actually
Right.
would draw attention and to kind of change the structure of what you're doing, but
Yeah.
it's not easy to think that way because it's kind of like it's easier to just throw it on the grid. but
Sure.
yeah, so I was wondering, so what would you call I think you did refer to what your writing style is, but if somebody was going to pin you in and say, well, how are we going to pitch this? What is your genre? Who are we sending this to? What's your writing style and your genre? You would say you're like
I
multi-genre.
go, no. Well, I have been labeled as electronic music, and I'm fine with that. Probably alternative, indie, electronic music. Is there more to it? Yeah. But,
Yeah, I
that's
think that
what
sometimes
it
when
is.
you get put into that, what I had a problem is like some people think electronic music is like EDM only,
Yeah.
and they forget, like, when I say electronic music, I'm talking about like Pink Floyd and Yes and Genesis and like Quadrophenia and Barbara O'Reilly. I'm kind of Keith Emerson, and so that they
Yeah.
forget about that because
Yeah.
that's like the beginning. Like I'm a heavy mode guy. I'm an analog synth modular synth guy,
Nice.
and so like that's what I grew up on. Stevie Wonder,
Yeah.
like Saturn, like like really heavy analog synthesizers and what you can do with them. And
Yeah.
it's like just doing a CDJ. Not that that's bad. You can do really cool things on an MPC and a CDJ, but like,
Yeah.
yeah, if you're on a Moog or a Prophet 5 or a Jupiter 8, there's really
Nice.
you can do.
Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
And I mean, I understand that people, and especially record labels, have a need to put you in a box, right? The record label, so that they can promote you. They
yeah,
have their system, and for people, for listeners to say, okay, and I understand what this is. So I totally understand where the need to do it, but of course, I would prefer if they just listen to it, but that's what it is.
So what do you think? One thing I like to kind of get into is today seems to be like a playlist world.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of an album oriented person. So I'm wondering from your style, I know the way we have to work is we end up having to put out a lot of singles and get them playlisted and then maybe an EP and then push an album. But it seems like the single was kind of king like in the 50s. Um,
Right.
what is that? What your thought is? Or do you still think of things in terms of like albums, or do you work as individual songs and then put them out there and see where they can go?
Mostly, I think in albums. I like to think in the concept of a cluster of songs that belong together. There's a certain story or several themes going on. Like you're presenting a bigger package than just one
Yeah,
song.
story. It's like an album's like a story to me. Like what I love about music in albums, because I'm a
Yeah.
child of the '70s and I used to just listen to vinyl because that's all there was.
And now
Or
everybody does that again.
yeah, and it was like or an 8-track. And
Oh, okay.
yeah, my father
Never
had a
did that.
vinyl and an 8-track. And I listened to songs on the Key of Life on 8-track.
Oh,
Yeah, the whole idea was with an album, what I liked about it on vinyl was, I'm listening to like a James Brown record and I listen
yeah.
to the whole thing.
Yeah.
I don't really take the time to go up to it and skip around. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that in back in the day when you listen to it like a Pink Floyd The Wall or a Wish You Were Here,
Right.
and you just sat in the basement with your friends doing whatever, and and it's like it was an experience just to listen to the whole side. You know,
Yeah.
I
And
think
they
that's
had put the songs in a certain order for
yeah,
you to get the story,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And at that time deciding when do we need the break for the B-side, and right?
Mm,
All of that. I used to listen to music like that. I had, headphones, and I would sit with the album cover and read the lyrics and
yeah,
all of that,
the whole
right?
experience. Like I think
Yeah.
when things become digital and virtual, and you don't have you don't have the lyric sheet, you don't have the
Mm.
liner notes, you don't have the art.
Yeah.
Like it was so amazing in the '70s. I'm a child of the '70s, and when you picked up like a Led Zeppelin album and it's got the little windows in it or it's got the little spinning wheel, there's like it was like a gimmick or whatever, but it was really
Yeah.
cool as a kid. You pick up a record and it was an
Oh,
experience.
yeah.
It was like you weren't just listening to it, you were touching it, you were reading
Yeah.
it, you were feeling it, and then it really connected you to the artist. I think you
Yeah.
like if you're a fan of like Yes or these bands, you're like, oh, I'm totally into Zepp and I'm totally into Aerosmith. Yeah, you were totally like you weren't just like one song I like from Aerosmith. Like I like the whole thing.
Right.
I'm gonna go see the
Yeah.
concert. I'm gonna watch the whole thing, and it seems like that's kind of getting lost today a little bit. That it's not that way,
I
but
think I agree with you. It has gotten lost. I think the silver lining here is, as an independent artist, I have more freedom, right?
to do that.
To kind of do whatever I want to do. I'm
Mhm.
also my own producer, so hey, uh, so that gives me the freedom to say I like the concept of an album of songs belonging together, telling a story, deciding, what order they should, you know, what's the flow of it, right?
Mhm.
And that there seems to be, who knows? We'll see if that ever comes back to mainstream. That's a question. We'll see
Yeah,
what
and it's
happens.
weird. It seems like hip hop artists are able to do concepts, right? There's a
Yes,
lot of hip hop albums where a lot of the fans have listened to the beginning to the end. If you bring up like a guy like
sure,
Tyler the Creator or Brockhampton or a lot of the
right,
hip hop bands, they have albums that are meant to be heard from beginning to end.
right,
They're full concepts, and it seems like in hip hop, way back in the day, it was like the Who or Styx or Pink Floyd would do that, but it seems like
yeah,
in rock, that's been lost, and like pop music, that's not what happened. Like Madonna could get everybody to listen to the whole album, right?
right,
Duran could get everybody to listen to the whole album. Rio, you're gonna listen to the whole thing. Um,
yeah,
it's just harder to do that today. I mean, there's some artists that are able to produce 3, 4 singles, and they can get you to do that. Um,
yeah,
that really kick, and then you'll get the whole record, but it seems more rare.
yeah. I mean, I guess that change came around the Britney Spears thing when it was all about 3 minutes. Like, if you can get if your first single is a hit, we'll put all the money into you. That's all that matters, right? And then you're
Mhm.
going to sell whatever comes from that. A little bit back to I guess, the Motown era and the 50s and 60s, where you only put out singles, right? So
Yeah, and then
pop,
eventually, yeah, they put them into a record, but they all kinda didn't were disjointed.
right? It's basically a collection of singles, right? At
Yeah.
that point. And I guess pop has kind of stayed there. Rock is a whole other can of
Yeah.
worms that would take hours to discuss where that went. But I mean, I'm pretty hopeful and positive about where independent musicians, like, the vinyl is coming back. Probably my
Yeah.
next record I'm going to put out on vinyl, with the sleeve for you all, with all the lyrics on there and all that. And more and more artists are doing that. And
Yeah. I
so,
mean, most of the artists I've interviewed since 2018 are album focused. And when
oh,
I bring
nice.
this question up, most of the people that have been on my podcast have talked about like 100 artists since 2018, and they all are focused, except, there's some in between that weren't, but I would say the
Mm,
majority have
right,
brought out the fact that they did listen to things as albums. They do want to do it that way. And that's part
yeah,
of why they're doing their own production work,
right,
because a lot of the people I talk to, that's what they do. And it seems to be like that's, in order to maintain that, you have to kind of control the reins, because if you go into the industry the way it is, they don't want you to do that.
right.
So,
Well, the music industry is set up in a different way for profit, right?
yeah.
It's they don't think, at least, that it's profitable to do it that way anymore. That's why the major label system fell apart. So we'll see what happens. I guess we'll just
Well, I
keep
think it's
making
just
music.
encouraging. Yeah, I just want
Yeah,
like to hear that people are going that way, and
yeah,
more bands. I think even because of what's going on in the world today, that I think people are taking a little more time and being a little more considerate about what they're writing about, right?
yeah,
And so they're telling stories. And if you tell a story, it's not going to fit in one 3-minute song, right? It will tend to fit in a collection of songs,
right.
uh, which is like the standard songwriter toolbook. Is like you
Yeah,
want to create a tapestry, right?
yeah,
You want to create like a blood on the tracks. You want to create some significant work that has
yeah.
some kind of theme, and that's what the past had. And I think every songwriter is like, okay, well, I do have a collection of songs and they do go together. It might not be a concept, but it feels like they're connected.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that's like the goal of any great songwriter. Is like, I don't necessarily have to do Tommy or Quadrophenia, but I could do something like a tapestry, or I could do something like, anything that Bruce does. It's not necessarily a concept album, but it feels like they're
No,
all.
but yeah, when Bruce does a record, there is some kind of theme, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
slightly different. He's talking about certain era or certain, like that. So yeah, it's not Tommy, but it's pretty fantastic.
yeah. I love the way he puts things together. I mean, like
Yeah,
Nebraska to me is like I felt like that was a concept, even though it isn't, but it feels
yeah,
like it. But
yeah. Well, the songs belong together, right?
yeah, it just
That's
feels like he would decide to do this lo-fi thing, which I
yeah,
think is really cool when people decide, I can just take a Tascam and record everything there. Like I think PJ
yeah,
Harvey did something like that one time. She's just been putting out a bunch of demos lately.
yeah.
And it's like her demos are better than some people's finished masters. you know?
Well, that says something about PJ Harvey, I think, how good she is.
Yeah. It's
You
cool
know,
when you can get that, somebody's
yeah.
first official cut. But I do find, and I don't know, as a songwriter, I like to ask people this. When you work on a song, do you feel like the first initial takes on it really get to the heart of what you're working on? And as you do more and more takes, you get away from what the original intent was?
Sure. Yes. It's always when it's new and fresh, it's um there's this usually a little bit of magic there that kind of wears off as you do take 30, 34, 35
Yeah.
to get that line right. So I always record and keep the original, like, raw, rough vocals that I
Right.
do, or whatever, and then I try to kind of fix them oftentimes, when something is off there or
Yeah.
whatever, because the energy it's so fresh.
Yeah,
So yeah.
sometimes I've heard that like a lot of bands, I was watching stuff on Fleetwood Mac and Elton John, he was saying like the third, we took like nothing but third and second takes, because
Yeah.
the third and second takes were so much better than the 20th one.
Yeah.
That
Oh yeah.
that's what we took. And it's like, yeah, it's even if there's a mistake, you go back in a lot of old records, you can hear the clipping, you can hear where they cut the tape, you can hear there's
Yeah.
actually an error.
Yeah.
but it's so good, it
Yeah.
doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And
I
I
mean,
think,
that's one of the challenges I think today is when you record digitally, you don't just have 8 tracks or 16. You have as many as you'd like, right?
way
So
too,
you don't have to compromise in that department at all. And you can keep recording. I have my own studio. I can spend all day doing one take after another, right?
yeah,
So being a little stressed, pressed for time, being a little feeling like, okay, we need to get it done. That's not necessarily a bad feeling to have. This better be the take. Get a little bit of angst and passion in there, rather than go, oh, we can do 300 takes.
yeah. I think there's something about like I like live recording style just because a lot of the bands I was into, like Hendrix and stuff and Clapton,
Mhm.
all my brothers, it was all kind of this like live tracking, and they do tons and tons of versions, but
Yeah,
it's like really it's the initial takes that always ended up being the ones. You go
yeah,
back, you read the history of like Electric Ladyland, and Hendrix had
mm,
tons of solos, and it's like the first 3 or 4 are the better ones than the last 20.
yeah,
Just it's just and they're all good. It's just that it seems like sometimes you just have to be willing to have like what I call the happy accidents. And
yeah.
if you think, also the thing of like, if you try to track Keith Richards into a DAW on the BPM, it's not going to work, right?
Yeah,
So I
no,
always tell people like, no, but isn't that cool? Like
yeah,
maybe you should not try to track it that tight and try to be more like what Keith is doing, right? Or
yeah,
more like what Keith Moon did. Because if you try to track Keith Moon, he didn't keep the beat; he soloed through the whole record, right?
yeah,
So he's not like a traditional drummer. And I've always been like a Mitch Mitchell or Keith Moon. The idea that they're not perfect, that they're kind
yeah,
of have accidents, that there are timing issues, but
yeah,
it actually brings character to the mix. That sometimes having those timing issues, you got to like let it go and say, well, yeah, that's not like Ringo.
no,
It's not like Charlie Watts, but but it actually is cool.
yeah. And I mean, that's one of the challenges, and I like this challenge is, so I work in Logic, right?
Mhm.
And now you have all where you can actually import, let's say, a drum beat by Charlie Watts, a couple of bars. He goes a little in and out of tempo, right? And then the program will analyze it and give you that tempo pattern for what you program,
Oh, cool. Yeah, so
right?
correct. Yeah.
And yeah, so it's like a groove thing, right? And I've been playing around with that, and it's not Charlie Watts, but for making electronic music, you can get that feel of a flow of a song with going a little bit in and out of tempo.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
Yeah,
pretty
I love
neat.
That's cool. I mean, the way we do it with analog machines is I can have my LFO trigger my analog drum machine. So
Oh, okay.
I'll have like an envelope or a LFO or an
Yeah.
oscillator or a random voltage generator. And
Oh,
so
okay.
I like to play by myself. I'm a one person band. So what I do is like to make I have my synths are members of the band. And if I take my analog synths and they're all running different clocks, and then they're all running these weird LFOs, they can sound like a fusion band because
Oh,
they'll
nice.
kind of randomly do things, but it'll be within time, but they're maybe a little off time, and it gives
Yeah.
you like a Sun Ra, like if you're into Davis or Coltrane, it gives you that kind of random feel, but it still has a beat, but it kind of feels
Right.
more human, and
Wow, that's neat.
that's how I try to humanize it because analog machines can actually give you that kind of human feel.
Yeah.
They're not as digital and they can kind of
Right.
go off. And that's what I kind of live in that world.
That's very neat. That's awesome.
It's a different way of thinking. And it's like some people who, if I tried to collaborate with, they're like, that doesn't work on the grid. It's like, well, it's never going to work on the grid.
Right.
It's not designed to
It's
work
not
on
supposed to, right? Yeah.
most of it. Yeah. So if you're working with the ghosts, like, yeah, it's not going to work.
Nope.
Sorry. But yeah, but I've been trying to get into stuff. I just got into an Akai Force, so I'm trying to do like, okay, fine, I'll try it, but I
Yeah.
still wouldn't do it in a DAW. I'm doing it on a Force.
Oh, okay. Well, listen, it's whatever works for you.
Yeah,
I
I
find,
just like hardware. That's my
yeah.
problem.
I mean, I work in Logic, and you kind of you're always, as a producer, and I'm sure you do this too, you kind of read up on the latest gear, and I'm like, oh, do I need this? Like, do I have to have all that? And I read this interview with William Orbit when he produced Madonna's Ray of Light. The guy worked on a Cubase and an Akai sampler. And he would record stuff like her vocals, but then cut them up, put them in the Akai sampler. So the entire record came out of the left and right of the Akai on a Cubase.
That's interesting because some hip hop guys use like Roland samplers like that. Like a lot of early hip hop is using like an SPC Roland that does like the same these Akais do. And it allows you to kind of loose flow, you know. And I like that because it kind of is like, to me, because I'm a guy who used to use a Tascam 8-tracker. And then I would just manually play Moogs and Rolands into it.
Yeah.
And it maybe use like a chord sequencer. But still, a lot of stuff was just manually played track by track into it. And, you know, using samplers, then you get tighter because you can quantize and you can unquantize to get things in a certain feel. It's all technical, but I do have your song, which I wanted to have people hear you.
Sure.
So I'm going to try to get that going again. So let me see, so we can actually show people what you sound like. So I got it up again. So make sure YouTube doesn't crash on me like it did last time, and let's try this again. So this is Pop Your Heart Out. We're going to play the whole thing this time. So that was Pop Your Heart Out. So we get back to our main interview. So you're still here with me, right? I can hear you.
I am.
Yeah, I did it right.
You did. Thank you.
But what I like about that song is that it does break up. and
Yes.
you do have the dancer. So maybe
Yes.
you can talk about how you produced the video and who the dancer is and the whole story about how you put that together.
Oh, now you put me on the spot because I do not remember the name of the dancer, but uh, I I've done a couple of videos with this music director named Bryce Pravat, and a New York. Well, he's in New York now.
Mhm.
And what happens when you make a music video is, all the people who are involved, we get together and we drink way too much, and then we start spitballing ideas. And somebody came up with this really bright idea that there's this guy walking around New York City with his own disco ball, just hanging it up wherever and having his own dance party.
Well, that's
And
cool.
yeah, and I wish I could take credit for that brilliant idea, but I didn't. I didn't come up with it. Anyway, so that was one of the drunken sessions that produced that idea. And to offset it, I wanted to have a live band feel,
So you had
with
like a live band, like '80s kind of video with like a real band playing, and it
yeah,
had that kind of new wave kind of element of like having like New Order or Joy Division. You'd see them actually in the video playing. Um,
yeah.
that
You
was like the
see,
whole thing
yeah,
in the '80s was like a lot of the new wave bands. You'd see them like Echo and the Bunnymen, all these guys. You would see them playing in the videos.
yeah,
And
yeah,
they'd have maybe concepts too, but you'd also would see it cut into the band actually, like The Cure is actually playing,
yeah.
Depeche Mode they're playing,
Right. And
and
I come from that background. I am a live artist. I've
yeah,
played
so
and
you wanna show that.
done that. So it was a natural thing to show it. And then this is actually a remix. So you have these two guys called the Specker Frex, whom I know, it's a wonderful name. I love it. I had found a couple of their songs on somewhere on the internet, and they were really into the glitch
Oh,
stuff,
which
but
wave,
doing it beautifully. I love their stuff. So I reached out to them, and they were gracious enough to. So this is a remix of the original, and so they're in the video too. They're the two guys. You know,
yeah, well, I like that really kinda glitchy, kinda
yeah,
techno driving, like a Prodigy kinda thing. It's got a little 9 Inch
yeah,
Nails, it's got the grit, because that's
yeah,
the cool thing, and like electronic music, you can be very melodic, you can be kinda, happy chords,
yeah,
or you can kinda come at it like Trent Reznor or Prodigy and actually slam like a punk rocker, right? Like,
yeah,
get a little heavy metal, a little death metal in it, and just kinda have that kinda razor edge thing, which I
yeah,
like to kinda put that in because, part of electronic music is that you can, simulate guitar type sounds or try to be heavier and not just
right.
do Beatle pretty chords or really nice, classical type chords. And it's nice to do that, but I think it's cool to
Yeah.
actually be a little more aggressive.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, going back to what the two music genres that I put together for my music, right? You want the pop rock song, the melodic stuff, but you want it to be hard hitting and big. And
Mhm.
so,
Yeah, you
like a
get that.
ham and cheese sandwich, baby.
Yeah, it's always cool to have that heaviness. Because I'm a big fan of
Uh,
Zeb and the groove bands,
oh yeah, yeah,
AC/DC, and like, oh yeah, it's like there's always a
yeah,
place to kind of put that heaviness in,
yeah,
you know, and that's like, it's kind of what kind of I like genre bending because like you can pull something in from funk, you can pull some jazz
yeah,
type of composition or some classical structure,
yeah.
and a lot of times heavy metal is that you see some of the heavy metals, a lot of classical type structures coming in
Oh yeah,
terms of like the way the guitar players
yeah,
are soloing. It's like a lot to do with that. But then there's like the heaviness of it is always kind of blues based. So you have a
yep.
little bit of blues heaviness and then some really, virtuoso classical type of scale mixing. But yeah, it's just always cool to see where you can take, 808s, 909, 727, all kinds of weird drum machines, Lin drums or whatever, and bring them in
Yeah,
and then kind of control everything and then make it get out of control. I think it's like the moments where
right.
things get a
Yeah,
little out of control is where the kind of punk nature of thing. I love punk aesthetic. And I
yeah,
think what I liked about Joy Division when they hit the scene was it's like one of the first new wave bands, unless you say I would say like Brian Eno was really one of the first new waves with Bowie, but
yeah,
technically Joy Division is one of the first new wave bands like in '79. And if you listen to Disorder, it's real guitar, but there's like this weird discordant synth in the back that's
Right.
doing all this weird stuff, and it's not like anything else. And that's kind of like it's that weirdness and it's off key, it's a little discordant. That's what kind of made them Joy Division compared to what New Order became, which was more
Right.
melodic.
Yeah.
But I think that Joy Division, like a lot of bands, ended up trying to create that with Depeche Mode, and people take that kind of noise or that kind of punk aesthetic and try to put that in wherever you can to kind of fit it.
Oh, absolutely.
It's always cool.
Yeah. I mean, going further, the Prodigy definitely has that punk thing going for them, mixed with who knows what, but it works. Love it.
Yeah, it's like a death metal punk, like, it's like Rage Against the Machine kind of energy.
Yeah.
But it's got this heavy metal, death metal, getting into like Metallica, you get into, Deep Purple.
Sure.
There's a lot of bands that had that kind of edge and the heaviness, and you kind of bring it in there. But then you get a band like The Clash. Like to me, it's like one of the best punk bands ever. And just
Yeah.
because they just went everywhere. I mean, they did hip hop stuff, they did African rhythms, they did all kinds of cool stuff. They did, but they had the first bands were like pure core hardcore punk,
Yeah.
and there's always a place for that because look what happened with Kurt Cobain.
Yeah.
He kind of brought back, he did like an original Clash type of record. Like
He
one of
did?
the first, like, yeah, when he first did, like, Nevermind sounds like, something what the Clash would have done.
Yeah.
And it brought it back because like punk was like dead, and then it came back as grunge. But yeah, I think we need another era of that kind of hard stuff because
We sure do.
I always I'm looking for the next like Nirvana. Or it might come from a different direction, but it's something like the Clash or Nirvana or the Sex Pistols or Ramones.
It'll come.
Yeah, because I think people want to get out. Like if a lot of people finally get out because of COVID, and you might see some bands break out that really have something to say, and they can say it in a way that like makes people want to see them.
I think so. I think it seems like music comes and goes in waves, right? The next wave is a reaction to the one that was right.
Yeah.
So if you have a huge pop wave, you're going to have something more aggressive, dark on the next one, and then you're going to have a reaction to that, and it's great. Just surf it and listen.
Well, I think that's so I wonder have you worked with other people? Do you do like features? Do you like work with other producers, or you primarily worked on your sound? Because I know a lot of people today, it's like all kind of feature based. So like the rappers that want to take something like a production that you're doing and I want that to be in my hip hop song or an EDM song, a vocalist, because they can't sing, but they need a vocalist. So have you had opportunities to kind of work cross genre like that?
Yeah, quite a bit actually, and it's something that I really enjoy. Most of my records is me playing all the instruments, and I do my own editing and producing and yada yada yada. And I do, but especially when it comes to vocals, I enjoy using other voices other than just me. And then it's really genre hopping. I love some of the R&B gospel vocalists. It's a sound that really works with what I'm doing to get those voices in there. Also some retro voices like think electro swing, like we're like 30s, 40s kind of voices. I've used vocalists like that. And then also when it comes to the instrumental side, different guitar players, right? You get your funk guitar player in there. I got a banjo player once I brought in.
Yeah,
but I treated.
Those are nice.
Yeah, I had this guy, Ian Thomas, love him. I saw him play in a small club in New York. He's like a Bob Dylan.
Oh, Dylan, yeah.
Yeah, and he came over, and he's like, I drink Guinness beer, and so I got him some Guinness beer. He came over with his guitar and his harmonica, and I just put up some beats, and he just played, and it was magical. And the song "Little Helper" came from that. That's him playing the acoustic and the harmonica on it, and it's a total like electronic pop song, but with Ian Thomas / Dylan in there.
I think that's really cool to kind of cross that because, like, if you think about that Dylan sound when he was just on his harmonica and a guitar, that's a cool
Oh yeah,
thing. And if
yeah,
you kind of merge that with like modern beats, that's it.
yeah,
Like you see that kind of going on today with country influenced hip hop.
yeah.
There
Oh
that
yeah,
that there's like people thought, oh, well, that couldn't work, and then it's working, right? And so
it's working
just like
great.
like fusion jazz based hip hop. There's a lot
Yeah,
of I really like it when you like a rap artist will kind of just do spoken word over like a fusion band, like a
oh
fusion
yeah,
jazz band in New York will actually
sure,
just play and then it have them be like a poet just reading poetry. And that always, I always felt like Lou Reed and the Velvets, that's what that was. Because
yes,
Lou Reed is a poet and he's
yes,
basically doing spoken word over this kind of early punkish band, um,
mhm,
doing kind of simplistic punk, but he's got the complexity of his storytelling being done
yes,
in a Dylan-esque way. And I was like, well, that's always cool. And I always tell people, like, if they can't sing and they're trying to sing, it's like, do spoken word, like write a poem and then tell a story that means something to you and speak it out, like Lou
true,
Reed or like the way Nico did. And
right,
that can actually have a really good impact and it can sound good. You don't have to try to stretch your voice beyond what you can actually do.
yeah.
So there's different things you can do. I mean, it's not going to be that song you were trying to do, but it might be a song that you should do.
No, I agree with you. I mean, go where it's hard because you oftentimes you know what you want to sound like, right? I mean, I want to sound like Whitney Houston. It's never gonna happen, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I have to
But
know that.
so go where the song takes you, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Make it special, make it you.
Yeah, if you think about it, you think of like a Juliana Hatfield or a Liz Phair. They don't have Whitney Houston's voice, but for their work, their voice is the only voice you could ever use,
Right.
right? So you
Exactly.
don't have to have perfect pitch. I mean, a lot of artists in that kind of genre is like, they don't have to have that, but it's what they say and how they say it. It's like Dylan.
Yeah.
Like Dylan, some people say, well, technically his voice is whatever, but he has so many different voices, from Nashville
Yeah.
Skyline to like Blood on the Tracks and the stuff he did with the band. Like when
Yeah.
he first started, he sounded like Arlo Guthrie. He sounded like Woody Guthrie. Then he
Yes.
changed to
Would
this other voice, and then the Nashville Skyline doesn't sound like anything else. And so
no.
he actually is a really
He's
good
half.
singer, but you have to like, well, he's not going to be Tony Bennett, and he's not Frank
No, but
Sinatra.
it's what he does. It
Yeah,
works for
what he
within
does,
Bob
his
Dylan,
material.
right?
Yeah, it
Yeah.
works for his material. So I think that's where you got to get to some people. It's like, well, I can't reach those Robert Plant notes.
Yeah.
Well, that
Don't.
do what you can do.
Yeah.
You know it
Yeah.
always like I was early in the '70s, everybody was trying to be like Robert Plant. Everybody's trying to
Yeah.
be Roger Daltrey. And it's like that you're not gonna be able to be those guys. Like be who you are, like you
Yeah.
said, and then be the
Yeah.
best version of you. And then that's kind of where I think bands like the Ramones and the Replacements and stuff, they were willing to realize, okay, I'm comfortable with who I am, and then
Yeah.
I'm sing within that, and then they really have something to say. Um, even like Michael Stipe, you think about that. It's like, you didn't even know what REM was saying in the first records.
Really, I didn't know that.
Well, if you listen to the first IRS REM records, it's like
Yeah.
mumble rock. You
Oh,
don't really know what
right.
Stipe is saying, but he
Yeah.
sings these harmonies that are really interesting. But
Yeah.
you're like, what is he really saying? You kind of imagined what he was saying. You didn't
Yeah.
really know. I mean, later when he got on Warner Brothers, they cleaned it up so you could actually hear what he said.
Yeah.
But a lot of people said, "Well, I like the IRS stuff because it's like I kind of imagined what he was saying and I didn't know what he was saying." but but um, but you never know because people who your audience sometimes thinks you said something that you
Yeah.
didn't. Because people interpret the song the way they want to interpret it.
Mhm.
But
That's
I don't know.
that's
Have you ever
part.
had like a fan like tell you what they thought the lyrics were for your song and then they got it kind of wrong?
Um, well, yeah, there's a line in Come On Y'all that's they said, well, what's the throw up line? They said. I'm like, what are you talking about? I mean, they're like, I really love the throw up line. I'm like, what? They go, well, the throw up like a pond. And I'm like, I think the line is blow up like a bomb, but they said it was like throw up like a pond. And I'm like, who does that?
Well, that's weird. That's it kind of tells you like how people interpret. Like I had a philosophy
Yeah.
teacher that would say like people kind of imagine what they want, right?
Yes.
So they hear something and that they kind of control it based on where their head's at. And
Yeah.
so like that's kind of music is very individual to the fan because
Yeah.
they hear something and they kind of imagine their own mind picture. And the artist could have one picture that they did. And I think it's kind of cool, when you don't have a video, sometimes because people just kind of interpret your song however it's going to be.
Yeah.
Because it is kind of like the fans kind of own your music once they got it, and they think it is what it is.
Yeah.
But I think that's the
Sure.
whole good thing about music is like people just take they hear what they how they see it, and it's like a sound painting. I was always
True.
into the idea that music is like sound paintings, and that you can color it in any kind of way you want, and that's kind of like the art of what you do in the studio compared to what
Yeah.
you do when because you think of it like when you're in the studio, do you feel like you have more tools like a painter, like a sound painter, than when you do something live? You're limited to being able to do it in a certain way. But
Oh,
when
of
you're in
course.
the studio, you can do all these things like George Martin Beatle tape loops and running things backwards and doing like the wall of sound or whatever. You have a lot of choices. And maybe it's the studio version is really supposed to be like that kind of sound painting interpretation of your work, and
Right.
then the live version is like, well, this is the actual real version, life version.
Right. No, of course. I mean, the studio to me is my playground. That's the laboratory, right? You go in and you create and you have all these like crazy machines and you try different things until the magic hopefully happens, right? Live to me is trying to recreate that not too far from the original, right? Since I make electronic music, if I went out and I played with a band, it would sound like pop or rock music, right? So I need a way to try and incorporate the beats or the sounds and the filters and stuff without making it too complicated. These
Mhm.
days, there's enough technology to help you do that. You run a track, right,
Yeah,
with
yeah, you can run stuff like
different stuff, and get some guy who really knows what they're doing to mix that in with it. But that's kind of the job for me live, is to try and recreate it not too far from what it was when we recorded it, but with that live energy feel, so it
yeah, like
doesn't
maybe the
feel like I'm
guitars
playing
might,
the record, right?
yeah, like the guitars and the drums might be a little louder than what it was in
Exactly.
the studio because you can
Yeah.
take advantage of those dynamics
Yeah.
that if you do have the live players, then that kind of you can take advantage of that.
Yeah.
Um, but I do, yeah. I mean, I what I do, I mean, with a lot of my stuff is I use a lot of sequencers, and now, like I said, I got an Akai, and so I can run all my stuff like it's Ableton Live, like running tracks. But I
Nice.
like to like not necessarily play it the way I wrote it, just because it's
Ah.
kind of like I'm gonna come over like a jazz guy. So if I do something, my thing is like I don't like to play my song the same way. I can if I want, if I really
Yeah.
have an audience that wants to hear something the way I wrote it, I will
Yep.
do it. But a
Okay.
lot of times I like to go out and actually purposely change it because then that makes it like unique for that performance.
Yeah.
Um,
That's
and so
amazing.
it's just a different way of thinking, and that's kind of like the reason I'm into music is because that's where I'm coming from. Like, there's so many different versions of Hendrix doing stuff
Yeah.
because that's what he would do. Or if
Yeah.
you go listen to Jim Morrison and Doors, it's like they go out and they do the end like 10 different ways
Yeah.
because that's the way they want to do it. Or the Grateful Dead, they would kind of do it. Or the Allman Brothers, like they go do something, but it's like not exactly the way they originally did it. They kind of go off. And I'm kind
Right.
of in that kind of tradition is what I like. But I do understand like today you can actually do your song the way you wrote it.
You can. And the problem when you play live, if you are using a sequencer, right, or you're running a track, it's like you can't go off script. It has to, you can
Yeah,
play
does
stuff
that
a
feel
little
limited?
differently, but it's still, if the ending is 8 bars, the ending is 8 bars, right? You've got to stick with it. So the challenge is to find ways to make it as live feeling as possible, to get that live feel, but with the push of having the electronic sounds in there, right?
Yeah,
And
I
it
think
can be done. It's just,
yeah, I guess it's a balance because sometimes some people go a little too far and it's
yeah,
exactly like the record.
yeah,
And then if you go see a band, it's like, is it like, did they just hit the tape button and they're playing it just like it was on the record?
yeah,
Because I think a lot of band, I mean, I'm up, I don't know, my child in the 70s. So I love seeing Pearl Jam because every night you could go see Pearl Jam 2 nights in a row
yeah,
and Eddie will actually do the song differently. He'll pull out
right,
different lyrics. The band will play it different sections. They'll change it around. But you see, it's in
yeah,
some modern rock bands, they'll play it exactly like the radio. And I'm like,
yeah.
okay, I'm not going to go see you 2 days in a row then.
You're right. But like, I'm a huge fan of Garbage, the band, and they use a lot of, sequencers, and they run stuff on tracks in the background and all that, but they kick ass. And I could see them, 2 days in a row. They would probably play the same set, but the energy, it's so live. And
Yeah, so
Shirley
they found a
Manson
way to
is so
make it
amazing. Yeah,
dynamic.
it's just, and their sound is great. It's huge because they're able to use all these electronic,
Yeah, I think what's
things
cool
in the
with
background.
yeah, I think what's cool with the electronics is like there's a lot of stuff today that's like grid based. Like I just got this
Yeah,
grid based one. And so you can change the order where the clips launch. So
yeah,
you could have all your clips, but you could be like, you could kind of DJ it. And the idea
yeah,
is I don't have to have clip 4 run with clip 5. I can take 4 and do it with 16 and then take 32 and
right,
move them around. And so in
yeah,
that way, if I did it that way and they're all in the same time or a little bit close time, I can actually still do a kind of like fusion based performance,
yeah,
even though I have all my stuff there and I could just run it through the way it's supposed to be,
yeah,
or I could actually mix it up. And if you then that gives you some ability to have some, control where all your parts are coming out, but they're actually coming out differently.
right. And then also, like, if what you what you sing and play live, if you bring the heart and soul, that is what gives you the live feel combined with the electronic, right? So if you're able
Yeah,
to
as a
bring it, that,
vocalist, yeah, you have
yeah,
to read the room, like, so you
yeah,
can take your emotions. That's why I think what's great about being a vocalist, because that you are the instrument, right?
yeah,
So you could read the room or you read your heart, right? And I
yeah,
think with a lot of it, like with a great vocalist, is you know the music could be the same, but how you deliver those vocals is really
yeah,
like your heart and soul, and you could do it because like you're feeling pain or you're feeling this or feeling that, and you that's how the performance differentiates itself, right?
right, absolutely. And you're gonna sing a little off key, you're gonna sing it a little differently, you're gonna, like you said, read the room, and that brings the heart and soul. Same as the guitar player, when he plays a little different. He feels it a little bit more over here, right? Tonight he's feeding off whatever goes on over there. And so I think electronic music has come a long way. And like I said, there's you have the technical stuff to help you today to be able to bring the two feelings together.
So I was wondering, like, have you done a lot of like online, like festivals, or because of, like what I've the complaint I've had from musicians is like if I do an online show, I can't read the room.
Right,
So I'm kind of reading to this like dead audience that I can't feel anything coming
right.
back. So I have no idea what if they're digging it. And some people have a hard time performing if they can't get that instant feedback. So have you tried to do that? And if you have issues with the way online is today?
I have not done online performances, and actually, now that you describe it this way, that this is probably why. I'm a huge reader of the room and the energy coming from the audience, going through me feeding it back to them. Um, I imagine doing an internet kind of, or the streaming show, like you're performing in a TV studio or something.
Yeah, it's
It
like
Yeah. So I prefer the real
yeah.
thing for
Can we
sure.
started to one thing before we leave? We have been pushing. What's one thing is like in January, I mean July, we actually took a bunch of the guests, like 22 of our podcast guests, that we had on the show, and we did 30-minute bedroom producer sets. So
Oh
we
wow.
set this as a Peg Bedroom Producer Festival. We did it from like July 16th to the 18th. We had 22 bands that we interviewed, do kind of intimate, kind of unplugged. And some of them actually did what you said. I had one band in Australia, the Safety Word. They actually went to a soundstage and did a performance on
Interesting.
a soundstage with lights and their full equipment.
Oh
And
wow.
so they were kind of into it, but they didn't have an audience other than like the people with the cameras in the room.
Right.
The engineers and stuff, I guess, so they were giving them a little feedback, but
Right.
most of the people were doing like unplugged or doing it in their home studio. And we're actually going to do it again in February from 11th to the 13th. So we always have an open invitation to anybody who's been on the program. If you're into that, you kind of have to read it the way it is. It's a chance to do like an intimate unplugged type of performance that maybe you wouldn't do live because it's kind of pared down. But yeah,
Yeah.
we're all giving people like the opportunity. If you want to participate, we are starting to book that out for
Oh,
February
thank
11th,
you.
13th.
It sounds really fun. So let me think about if I can like do it the right way and bring it, and that could be fun.
Yeah, we just like, so it's cool. Like if you want to, we can try it, and you can talk to me offline about how we set it up.
Sure.
Yeah, so it's we can send you a link of like to what it looked like before. But yeah, I think we're rounding up today. We can only run like about an hour, or about 8 minutes over. But that's the way it goes with this show. Is like sometimes like you don't know if you're going to be able to do the full hour, and then you go over an hour.
See, we could do another hour and just keep chatting.
Well, I think it's just really cool to talk to other musicians. I mean, that's why I did
Yeah.
set this
Thank
up,
you.
because I think with the pandemic, eventually we wanted to be able to do this like in New York, and
Right.
actually have people come to a studio and
Yeah.
be in the studio. But right now we got to do it like this, which it's working because we get to talk to people all over the world. But yeah, we just appreciate that you're on the show. We want everybody again to check the link tree that's been streaming below here and check out all your work. Everybody should like check that out. Go to your YouTube channel, subscribe to it, download, click, like. If when you're with a musician, following a musician, you need to treat it like a YouTuber. Say you like it, subscribe, tell other people about it, playlist it on Spotify, playlist it on Apple Podcasts. I'm a big promoter. Like if you like a musician, do everything you can as a fan to show that you like them.
Please love me.
Well, yeah, I
Just
think it's
kidding.
just, coming from the back in the
Yes.
day in the 70s, we kind of did love people like that. I think we should try to get
Yes.
that back.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much for being on the show. We will send you the other information as it starts to show up at other places. And yeah, we're looking forward to it. We always have people come back on. So the next project you have, if you have an album release, let us know and we will push that.
I'd be happy to. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Take care. Bye-bye.